Homespun crafts inspired by Women's Day magazine, this time on the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. As a fellow educator, I know that taking our social studies classes to historical sites and museums can be a rewarding experience for everyone involved. But between coordinating transportation, keeping track of permission slips, and paying out of pocket for unforeseen expenses, it can also be a large task for a busy teacher. The Everything is a Primary Source to Go artifact borrowing service replicates the most engaging part of a museum field trip, and that's interacting with real historic objects directly in your classroom, but without the process and cost of taking your class off campus. The Everything is a Primary Source archive contains ephemera and physical objects dating from the 1820s onward, with emphasis on the 20th century. Pre-made and curated kits pull from the collection and are designed to complement your curriculum, just as the exhibits at your favorite cultural center do. Visit everything-history.com to learn more about EPS to Go and how it can help you bring the museum to your classroom. Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we navigate history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture. So I'm with Monica, who is the president of the New Hampshire Council for Social Studies, and you're also a teacher.
Yep.
In
Manchester, yep.
New Hampshire, which is, talk about a perfect connection here, because Manchester named that because of the woolen mills there, the textile
in Manchester,
mills,
England,
to be the new Manchester for America. And here we are looking at a magazine from approximately 150 years after that Manchester was created in 1978, and some of the same materials that were used 150 years earlier to make the textiles that were coming out of those factories are now being promoted as basically ways to pass your time. Maybe make some gifts here and there, but tell us a little bit about what you're looking at.
It's just so interesting. My first thing, and this is, I'm actually a crafter. I'm a quilter, and I've dabbled in various fiber arts, and I'm looking at these knitted and sewn objects, and knowing it was the 70s, I'm just thinking about all of the polyester and probably how terrible some of that yarn was, because I'm pretty sure my grandmother, even when I was a child in the 90s, was still knitting with that yarn, and I just remember those sweaters being horribly uncomfortable. And just, it's so interesting because it's talking about, bazaar bestsellers, and that whole culture of church bazaars, and just women filling their time with these little handicrafts, either to give or to sell. And obviously now we have the craft fair culture, but most people who do that, that's a business for them. It's actually a full-time occupation. It's not something whiling away their hours while the roast is in the oven and the kids are at school, and the maid is coming through, so you're gonna go in your little room and do some crocheting or macrameing of hanging plant pots.
So the publication that this is in is a Women's Day, and I'm not sure exactly when Women's Day started, but I do have another copy at this table from 1942. A Woman's Day in 1942 is remarkably different from a Woman's Day in 1978. Yet, if you're looking through the 1978 one, you would think that nothing has changed, because they are really making it seem like she is Susie Homemaker, that's her only job, is to be somebody that stays at home minding the house, which is a job in itself. It's not at all something that we should look down on. It's absolutely one of the hardest jobs you can can probably imagine for something somebody to do, because while there's routine, there's also surprises every single day. You have to manage economically. It's always the home ec classes in schools, everything in the household. But you're right. It seems like their cover story with showing these little plush animals, darling toys to sew. It seemed like the job of using those kinds of skills was relegated just to entertain yourself and maybe give little gifts here and there. It wasn't, if you go looking back at 1942, essential to keeping the household running, to do as much as possible with as little as possible. And if you go back even further, that was actually that. So, like you're saying, this is like a fun thing to do.
Yeah, not a necessity.
Not like, oh, my husband's only pair of pants ripped, I need to mend them. It's, oh, now we get to. Do you think that has overall positive things for the women's movement, or is it, because this is also 1978, this is the same time as like the Equal Rights Amendment was being promoted and talked about, and there seemed to be a controversy among women, some saying, this is how I express myself, this is what I want to do, I want to be a homemaker, my woman's day should be made up of taking care of the household, and you're telling me that I'm wrong because I'm not pursuing a career? I know I just said a mouthful, but what's your take on it?
It's one of those things that's very interesting, particularly as a quote-unquote modern woman nowadays, because I've often felt like we are being asked to do more and more and more and expected to do more and more, because some of these things have gone away. We're not sitting around tatting in our free time, but we're still managing a household and a career and raising children, and then the PTA calls, and sometimes it's selling chocolate bars, but other times it's, hey, can you make a couple costumes for the play? And I remember very distinctly when I was young, I think it was first grade, and I went to school, and the teacher was asking, like, I think she was fishing for parent help, and I told her, oh, well, my mommy sews. And
thanks, Monica.
Yeah, and then after that, I remember having a very frank conversation with my mother that she was like, don't ever tell anyone that. It's not that she was ashamed of it or anything along those lines. It's just so few people have that skill nowadays that, you know, everyone wants you to hem their pants, or can you help make my child's Halloween costume? And as someone who also has those skills now, for me, it's not a required part of my day, except when I require it of myself, because for me, it's actually my form of expression. It's therapy for me. I will go down in my lair if it's not my night to do bedtime, and I will quilt for a couple hours and watch Big Bang Theory and just disassociate. And for me, it's so funny thinking of it as an expectation, and now it's almost a guilty pleasure. And for me, it provides that wonderful bit of escape. And I wonder often, like, women who it was exactly the opposite, who, you know, couldn't handle that stuff, who couldn't craft or didn't like it. You know, for them, that was that measure of femininity. And nowadays, it's seen as old-timey, but at the same time, it's also a point of pride. It's so interesting to see how that concept has changed over the course of decades. And just thinking about where my skills and my passion for it came from, being passed down through the generations. But did my grandmother actually really like to craft, or was she doing that as Susie Homemaker? Right. And when my mom, you know, started picking it up, was it as a way of trying to connect with her mom? It's just so interesting.
I remember reading an article not long ago saying how women who are getting involved in interests that, you know, like for example, like raising chickens for their eggs.
Yep.
It's still around, but people in suburban settings doing it was like something about the last 20 years or so, it seems to be more popular. Or making bread from scratch, or, you know, doing chores around the house that in the last 40 to 50 years, we have plenty of technology that's there to replace that. And the article is saying, like, is this showing disrespect to ourselves? That, like, part of the reason why those inventions were made was to allow for women to not have to be chained to the household. That the purpose of putting eggs in the grocery store was that wasn't one of their household chores every single day, and that they never had time for themselves, that they couldn't pursue a career because they were always busy, hitting the carpets out, the rugs out with a broom. That's why we have vacuum cleaners, and you know what I mean. So it's like it was questioning this like revival in going back, but what it sounds like to me, and I'm wondering if it's true in 1978 as well, that you choose to do these things. You're not forced to do it by your society or anything like that. It's like your decision. And you combine modern pleasures, like watching a favorite TV show, with the quilting. And so it's like, in 1978, these women might have been doing the same thing too. They might have been saying, I want to make, like, the economics are there. I could make, with the same materials, something actually practical for the household, or I can make a silly plush toy to give to the neighbor kid for Christmas. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting too. I wonder about this now. How much of our return to these old school doing things by hand, there is something that is so human about not just dealing, nowadays with all our technology, we're just doing things with our eyes and our ears. And I think there's something to be said for doing something with your hands and doing something beautiful with your hands, whether it's watching your chickens grow and lay eggs and then, eating fresh eggs for breakfast with your kids, or if it's actually, that almost instant gratification that we all love and all seek, in that endorphin rush of, me finishing a seam and ironing it open and watching a block emerge in quilting. It's so gratifying in a world where we are often chasing instant gratification, but we have nothing to hold at the end.
Yeah.
Why do people obsess over Candy Crush and getting to the next level? You have nothing at the end of that.
Engaging students with authentic learning experiences is essential to being an effective teacher. Here's the 2026 New Hampshire Teacher of the Year, Megan Philbrook, speaking about her experience with my primary source borrowing service, EPS2Go, which aims to do just that.
Going above just our standards is really, really important to grab our learners and engage them. And I think that's what your kits really do. It's a museum in a box that comes to your classroom that makes our teaching lives so much easier. So once I had my first taste of your kits, I knew that there's something here that we social studies teachers really need to draw upon more. So that finalist visit is your last round to kind of show off and showcase what you can do and why you should be New Hampshire Teacher of the Year. And with my primary source kit, I would like to think, of course, that I definitely wowed the selection committee. There was just something in there for every single person that came to visit, and my students were right in the history, and you couldn't ask for more.
If you'd like to learn more about how EPS2Go can bring an authentic history experience directly to your classroom, visit everything-history.com/EPS2Go today. I have to agree with you because we've been conditioned as a society to take part in all of these digital things. I mean, right now, my biggest annoyance is that my digital thing is not cooperating because our conversation is going onto it, and I want to keep that. That's the result of what we're doing here. But so often what we're doing is sunk costs. You're just spending all of this time immersed into an app or a game on your phone with nothing to show for it, maybe a funny graphic on your screen once you get past a level. And I'm curious if that was something affecting society in the late 70s. I know that this magazine came out in an era where there's a really popular show on television called Little House on the Prairie.
I used to watch it.
Little House on the Prairie was the TV version of a 20s and 30s series of books by Laura Ingalls Wilder, who herself had grown up on the prairie.
Yep, homesteading.
And they're quaint little stories. There's really no major plot lines to any of the books. It's all just like everyday life type stuff. And for people in the 20s and 30s, that was exciting because be like, oh wow, it was not that long ago that everything around your house you had some hand in making or getting. And their Christmas time was just Pa playing the fiddle. No gifts. It was just, that was his gift to his family. It was a day of not working, and here's me playing a song for you. By the 20s and the 30s, well, the 30s especially, it's good to get back to handicrafts because a lot of people needed that to get by. But the 20s saw a rise in the home loom. So like the small model looms that they would have, not the big power looms. Looms were traditionally, men were the ones who made fabric. That was traditionally a men's job. It wasn't until Manchester and Dover and Lowell, the Industrial Revolution, that it became a woman's job.
Because we're cheaper.
Cheaper, and they could reach their hands into the machinery and move the bobbins around without it getting stuck as much. And they were building up their dowries so that they could be married off later on with some actual cash on hand and helping their families on the farm. So you can look back from the 20s to Little House on the Prairie, the actual story, and be like, wow, I want to take part in that, but I don't want all of it. Like the women's revolution was ongoing in the 20s. The right to vote had been secured early in that decade. You had women dressing like they'd never dressed before throughout that time period. It doesn't ever stop. But when these books would turn into a TV show, what better time for that TV show to be popular than the 70s? A tumultuous, rather dark 70s. Plus, you got the bicentennial, so you have that connection to the past too. So now it's like, I just said so, haha. But therefore, it would be collected there. It's like, okay, so you want a little bit of this connection to this thread to the past.
You're just laying it on
spinning a yarn with this. You want this connection to the past, but you don't want to give up all of the niceties of modern life. Here's this nice, happy medium.
I think it's a nice balance, and I think it's nice to live in an age when it's almost a buffet. You can have as much or as little of it as you want, and it's really interesting to see now how this idea of handicrafts and so forth is actually even coming back into vogue, and it's interesting to see how technology is now being leveraged to preserve these skills. I follow the Missouri Star Quilt Company, and they are just constantly posting tutorials and YouTube videos. There's now a whole industry, they're called woobles or wobbles, that it's learned crochet kits, and it's little critters, and you get your whole kit with the yarn that you need and your pattern and a QR code to scan for a video to learn how to crochet. And I'm finding actually that there are young people and people who are middle-aged, I hate saying that about myself, who are hearkening back to these kinds of things. Even the advent of that whole like diamond painting thing that everyone's doing, where you buy these kits and you stick the gems and you make a picture. I think in some ways it's almost rebelling against the over-tech of our stage, our age, because I think we're starting to realize, I don't know if it's our kids having too much screen time or us realizing that there is no gratification really that comes out of that screen. It's what can I do that makes me feel happy, feel accomplished, that actually isn't a waste of my time. And I think that's a really huge thing that we are going through as a society. And I think it's kind of interesting to watch. I don't have a daughter, I have a son, but if he wants to learn to sew, I will absolutely teach him. My husband has helped in every wedding quilt we've given. Granted, maybe he's just ironing. or maybe he's sewing 1 or 2 seams before he hurts his fingers. But I think it's nice that these are coming back around and that we are finding a way to blend them in with our modern lives. And there's no pressure to do them or not do them anymore. I think the element of choice gives more joy to these activities, and I think that's actually helping bring them back and preserve them. Because how many people are taking up crocheting because their friend crochets? Not necessarily their mother or their grandmother, but their friend started crocheting and, oh, I made this cute little wooble. Oh my God, you got to try one of these kits. They're $20 and you just sit there and you do it while you watch, I don't know, The Bachelor. And I think it's such a unique thing in that it's that thread that you pull through the ages, that concept of handicrafts, and how much that would be kind of an interesting chart to see quantity of handicrafts versus necessity versus enjoyment. Because absolutely, there were women who hated the church bazaar and hated the fact that they had to come up with some stupid little something that they had to make. Meanwhile, you have, Susie around the corner who she just does that all the time for fun. And, now we have a lot more choice.
I remember going to craft fairs in the early 90s, and usually right between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because that was an easy gift giving to get, and you would feel good because you're paying somebody locally who's making it, or just their own business people, and so it wasn't just going to Walmart or the Toys R Us or something like that. You're actually giving them the money for but zero of the things that they were selling were needs. Right? It was all wants.
Oh yeah.
It was all, they might go along with needs, but they were, some kind of, pot holder or something like that, but it wasn't at all that. I'm wondering if that mindset that you were just describing, minus the aspect about, actually all the screens could still be referenced in the 70s. Mm-hmm. This is also the same time that the home video games were starting to be.
Atari.
And so this might have been some kind of resistance or opposition to that whole, like, you kids go to the video game arcade, but you come home with nothing. Mm-hmm. You just spent all of your money. You got that short enjoyment. Here I have a sweater that you can wear this sweater. It'll keep you warm. It's ugly because it's 1978, but you can still have this, and it's something that was perhaps, like, even if it wasn't ever articulated out loud that way, just kind of like a reminder, I have something tangible that I can use and will last. Mm-hmm. You have nothing.
And I think it's also, the other thing I think is interesting is, when does the shift between I have to do this from an expectation of my gender to I want to do this because it's kind of fun, to those of us who also use it as an expression of love? Because those sweaters that my grandmother made, however ugly they were and uncomfortable they were, it was something that she took the time to make with her hands, and it was done out of love. And I think that's also a huge difference, is at what point is it necessity versus expectation versus pleasure and love? And I think that's kind of an interesting place where we are as a continuum. Sure, did Abigail Adams mend John's breeches out of love? Yes, but did she also do it out of necessity? Yes. Maybe Martha Washington hated mending, and so she did it out of duty. But when do we get to the point where these sorts of things when does it make the shift from more necessity to more pleasure? And that would be kind of an interesting thing because we don't have to anymore. There is no expectation, because, if you don't want to contribute to the bake sale, you go and you buy a box of Rice Krispie treats. Mm-hmm. But if you want to contribute, you bake amazing cupcakes, and you do that out of an expression of love of not only yourself but of what you are helping, what you're supporting.
Isn't that interesting how so many items at the store originated in people's households?
Oh God, yeah. The basic Rice Krispie treat, yep.
They even sell ugly sweaters. Oh my God. The essence of an ugly Christmas sweater is one that was probably homemade out of one of these designs.
Oh God, yeah.
I always think of the one from Bridget Jones's Diary where he has a giant Rudolph on the front of his sweater. Now they actually factory make ugly sweaters, and it's like those are just a few examples of how people did handicraft things either out of necessity or love, and it became consistent with and a component of the home, comfort things, comfort joys, and then now they're back in the marketplace and you could actually buy it at the store, and it's just not quite the same.
And the thing about it too is the mass production of what I would call faux handicrafts also gives incredibly unrealistic expectations for those of us who do craft, because when people find out, oh, well, you quilt, can you make me a quilt? Do you know how many hours, how many thousands of dollars just goes into, when you factor in the time and the material and it, oh, well, I can buy that for 50 cents at Walmart, or probably not 50 cents, but like, oh, well, Kohl's had a coupon on quilts last week and I can buy that for $20. I'm like, no, you can't, but okay, if you want to think that, have fun. And, just in the same way that those horrible sweaters from my grandma, I could buy a better sweater, but there's just something about those, my son has actually worn a couple of those horrendously uncomfortable polyester sweaters. And I don't know, it's interesting to see. And at what point will we, I think even now the homemade things will last in both quality and memory much longer than the mass-produced ones. And I wonder how long that's going to last. When is the ugly sweater going to go out of vogue? When is, the mass-produced, crochet thing going to go out of vogue? Just interesting to think about.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
For this conversation.
Oh, nice chat.
After. Thank you.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.